The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, College Edition, featuring Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. PA Power Wrestling. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
Welcome in, wrestling fans. You are now dialed in to the PA Power College Podcast. As Jason Bryant of the Matt Talk Podcast Network said, I'm Tristan Warner, joined by my main man, as always, Mason Beckman, a.k.a. Beck Diggity. Mason, what's going on, man?
Just another day in paradise out here in the beautiful city of Pittsburgh. How about yourself, T?
Not a whole lot, man. We had about six sound checks here to make sure my voice didn't sound like Darth Vader. And I think on this one, we're finally good to go. So this is just a little behind-the-scenes note for those fans out there who get to listen to us talk here but don't really know what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so, at least if the podcasting thing doesn't work out, Tristan could always kind of be James Earl Jones part 2, because if we put out the unedited versions of some of our podcasts, he could pass for Darth Vader or Mufasa, depending on which side of James Earl Jones you prefer. But sound check issues aside, some corrections and notes from episode 3 now that this is episode 4. First and foremost, as far as we had the conversation about the best Pennsylvania wrestling families, and
we dropped the ball once again.
Yeah, we did drop the ball pretty bad. Well, in regards to one family especially. So the Jones family, Vertus, Greg, and Donnie, 3 brothers, all from Greensburg-Salem High School, which, by the way, their hometown is Slickville, Pennsylvania, which is one of the coolest hometowns when it relates to wrestling ever. Just
pretty good descriptor for those guys as well, especially Donnie, especially when he was in high school.
Oh, all 3 of them. I mean, if you got to see Vertus, Greg, or Donnie wrestle, although Greg was just such a powerhouse. But anyway, so Vertus and Greg, between the 2 of them, combined for 6 All-Americans, 5 trips to the national final. Vertus was a 2-time national runner-up. Greg was a 3-time national champ. And Donnie was a national qualifier. All 3 of them for West Virginia University. So, apologies to the Jones family for leaving them out. I personally really dropped the ball there because the Jones family's kind of my neck of the woods, being Whippeal guys. I'm not from the Whip, but yeah, that one's on me. And the other one, who's also a Whippeal family, the King brothers, both of whom were multiple-time All-Americans at Edinburgh, Matt and Jared. Matt being the older, Jared the younger. Jared won a national title in a pretty wacky match with Andrew Howe. And that was Howe's true freshman year, wasn't it?
True freshman year, that's right. I think Jared King was like a 12 seed, too. It was not the favorite of that weight class by any means, if I remember right.
No, and that was the first time that King had really been completely healthy for a national tournament run. Because he started out at Oklahoma and dealt with a lot of injuries out there. Had 3 shoulder surgeries, I think, in his time at Oklahoma, some ridiculous thing. And, as a guy, a Pennsylvania native that was out there unable to wrestle and everything, he transferred home, closer to home, at Edinburgh, got himself healthy, and then got a staph infection. He missed like 2 months of his national title season with a staph infection, but got himself healthy. If you remember him wrestling Howe at all, he had that one leg all taped up because he'd had the staph infection in his knee. But he got himself all taped up and, put it together. I think won a pretty tight match with Howe. Got himself into a body lock, which was kind of King's thing. Got himself into a body lock, finished that one takedown and made it stand up through some pretty impressive acrobatics and flexibility. If anybody that never saw King wrestle, one of the most flexible dudes I've ever seen. His go-to, well, I'll tell you what, good guy to compare him to defensively is Megaludis. If you got to King's leg, almost inevitably the dude was going to go splits on you. It was ridiculous. I remember watching him wrestle Howe, and he just frustrated the living heck out of Howe. Because every time Howe would get in on a single and try to get it high, King would just go splits and sit there and start fighting hands and just kind of look at him. And they must have gone through that sequence like 5 or 6 times that match. So, again, apologies to the King brothers. That neither one of those families are ones that should have been left off that list.
Man, I gotta say, Mason, you know some incredible stuff. I've been called the wrestling encyclopedia by a lot of people. I know some random statistics and facts, and I remember some weird scores and people's names, but you talking about guys with staph infections from over 10 years ago, you could probably tell us what deodorant they wore and what they ate for breakfast that day, the match, and what kind of toothpaste they use. It's pretty impressive, man, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in the sport, it's kind of always what I've done for fun. And, I mean, in my free time, even now, if I'm bored sitting around the house or whatever it is I'm doing, if I have free time, almost invariably, I'm out on YouTube looking at old interviews, old matches. A guy that actually, as far as the matches he's dug up, has been a huge source of mine is Earl from D1CW.com. Okay. Great site, and he always posts his, kind of his video vault matches. So if you ever get bored, go to his YouTube channel, and it's awesome. You'll find some hidden gems in there. One of my personal favorites it does involve a Pennsylvania guy. Chris Heinrich, his semi with Jay Borschel.
I just watched that the other day.
That's one of the funnest matches you'll ever wrestle.
Yeah, I actually grew up wrestling with Chris Heinrich in elementary school. I lived in the Philly area. North Penn youth wrestling team. That's where I started wrestling, and he was a couple years older than me. And then, ironically, I moved out of there. But ironically, I wrestled him in college my true freshman year. He was a fifth-year senior at UVA. That was the next year after that had happened. But yeah, I remember seeing the score that he lost a crazy match, but I didn't see the match. That was one of the few times I didn't make it out to NCAAs that year. And going back and watching that match, it's almost hard to watch because I was rooting for the guy, and just to see anybody, even if you don't know him, just to see anybody lose a match in that fashion. But you got to give credit to Borschel because not very many people would have been able to mount a comeback like that. No,
and another national semi that Earl has posted on YouTube that is awesome if you get a chance is Jay Jaggers and Charlie Griffin. Griffin being a Pennsylvania native from Reading. Jaggers gets a huge lead. He's up like 7-1 in the first. And Griffin, it's actually really interesting. It shows you how in-match adjustments can make this enormous difference. Griffin starts shooting to the other leg, goes from lefty single to lefty high crotch about halfway through that match, and mounts this huge comeback. And the whistle blows with Griffin cutting off, with Jagger sitting on his butt, and Griffin cutting off to a double to score the tying takedown. But they said time was out before Griffin got his hand across. But that's another one. If you want to go watch a match that not many people have talked about because it happened in the semis, not the finals. And at that point, that wasn't that long ago. It was like 08 or 09. But at that point, they didn't nationally televise the semis and cover them the way they do the national tournament now. Go look that one up.
First title year?
Yeah, first title. That was the year he beat Mendez in the finals. Anyway, not to derail too much. Starting out on a bit of a somber note here. Send our condolences out to the Pit and entire Whitfield wrestling family with the passing of Joe Solomon. Joe was Pitt's second ever NCAA champion in 1954. Was a couple-time All-American for the Panthers. He was a Cannonsburg native. And not only was he a great wrestler, he was a model American. Served in the Navy after graduating. So, incredible wrestler, a serviceman, someone who obviously did a lot in his time on this planet. First and foremost, want to thank him for his service and send our condolences out to his family and his loved ones out there in Cannonsburg and the Pitt wrestling family.
Yeah, well said, Mason. We send our condolences out to them, everyone at PA Power Wrestling, just as we did with the passing of Chris Bentley a few weeks ago. And moving on from there, some other big news coming out of the wrestling world today. Seems like there's a new story every day coming out now, and it seems like this one's been lingering. It's been bubbling in the cauldron, if you will, and it seems to have, the plot has just thickened. And, I got a buddy who I was friends with down at ODU who I worked with, Tim Wentz. He's a big New Jersey wrestling historian. This guy remembers and knows more New Jersey wrestling. He gives you a run for your money, Mason, when it comes to just New Jersey wrestling. And I swear, these guys have some kind of telepathy when it comes to New Jersey wrestling news. My phone's blowing up, and he's buzzing me up about this Nick Suriano news. I swear, before I even saw it on Twitter or anything. I don't know how these guys figure this out. It's like they're on the same wavelength, but it looks like Nick Suriano's transfer rumors to Rutgers may actually have some backing to them. And as we've seen maybe about a month ago when the rumors started circulating, it seemed like this was very far-fetched. I think some of the Flow guys maybe even tweeted that, this was not going to happen. This was not a thing that was going to come to fruition. But as we see today, Mason, it looks like Suriano's intention of leaving Penn State is for real, and Penn State is trying to block it in every way they can.
If you didn't see, there's an article floating around the internet. It's on PennLive.com. I found it on a New Jersey, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a New Jersey newspaper site. The article in short says that Suriano flat out wants out. Penn State has signed a transfer release for Suriano, which means he can transfer, but what they haven't signed is an in-conference transfer release. So that means, like we talked about in our last podcast, if Penn State doesn't sign off, and it is now up to the Big Ten to make a decision as to whether or not they give Suriano a release to have all 3 years of eligibility remaining. If the Big Ten says no as a conference, Suriano is then left with a decision. He can either stay at Penn State, obviously, and nothing changes. He can go to Rutgers and only have 2 years of eligibility remaining, or he could transfer outside of the Big Ten and have all 3 years of eligibility remaining.
You'd have to think that if he wants to transfer out of Penn, not very many guys want to transfer out of Penn State. We talked to Kellen Stout earlier this year, a little bit of a different story. He was clearly thankful for his time at Penn State and just more saw it as Pitt's rebuilding. It's close to home. He definitely has a spot in the lineup where at Penn State he might have been, stuck behind some other guys and wasting some time. But Suriano is a totally different case. This is a guy that could easily be a national champ or be a contender. So him leaving Penn State, you'd have to think it's more because he wants to go to Rutgers. He wants to be in New Jersey. He wants to be back in his home state. But it doesn't seem like it would make a whole lot of sense for him to transfer anywhere else. That's just my take on it.
No, man, I completely agree. And at least in my eyes, if you're going to leave a program, I don't know what went on with him at Penn State and everything, but if you're going to leave a program like that where he was in a position, even after defaulting out of Big Tens, he's still the 3 seed, has a win over the eventual national champ.
This is as a true freshman, mind you.
Yeah, true, as a true freshman. With all of the things that took place at Penn State as far as him having success, you'd have to think that it's more so that he wants to go to Rutgers as opposed to leave Penn State, right?
Unless there's something with how the whole postseason thing ended. That's the only other thing I can think of. Because, until that news broke, it didn't. There was no suspicion of anything like this. And then as soon as the season ended, little by little, these rumors started popping up. So the only thing you can really think is, I don't know, maybe he wanted to wrestle and he didn't get cleared and he's holding it against the coaching staff or the medical. I know, something like that. Other than that, I can't see what you could possibly have against Penn State. And that's not me being a biased, lifelong Penn State fan. But, honestly, what faults can you find with them? I don't know. Even you're a Lehigh guy, and
No, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for the Penn State coaches and their program, both on a wrestling and a personal level. But, the thing that I'm wondering about this whole situation is, as far as them not signing his in-conference release, if Suriano had come out in May and said he wanted a release in May, would they have signed off then? Because that would have given them all summer to replace him for if there's anybody nationwide that was transferring, whatever, with everything else that was going on. If Suriano comes out and says it in May, do they okay his transfer in May?
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking.
It's an impossible question to answer, but it's something to think about. Maybe that's part of it, right?
It could be, but just jump to the next topic right along there. If Suriano does leave, who's Penn State's 125-pounder? I don't even know who else is on the roster below him. He came in and started right away for not only because he was so good, but also there wasn't another guy there that he could really afford the red shirt and then they could wrestle. From what I remember, it seemed like he was, from the time he was coming out of high school, it was a sure thing Suriano was starting at 25.
Yeah, both out of function and the fact that he's that good right away, and out of necessity. But not to dwell on that for too long, staying in Happy Valley really quick, Cale Sanderson has signed a long-term deal with Penn State. Not that that's a shocker, and not that anybody actually thought he was going to leave, but it's been inked, the details of which have not and will not be released publicly. But for Nittany Lion fans, can all rest easy. Cale staying in Happy Valley long-term. The other thing, Tristan and I, we talked a little bit last podcast about how that may or may not affect what he's able to do recruiting-wise. That's now a moot point. So Coach Cale staying in Happy Valley long-term, much to the chagrin of the rest of the college wrestling world. So,
and speaking of that real quick, Mason, I'm sure you've looked at this. Have you seen the top 100 pound-for-pound recruits coming out next year? I think the class of 2018. I want to say Penn State already has inked 4 out of the top 5 or 5 out of the top 10 or something ridiculous like that. Off the top of my head, I think they got Teasdale.
It just so happens
Roman Bravo Young.
I have this in front of me.
Mikey Beard.
Yeah.
So they have
Neville's.
They have numbers 3, 4, 5, 7, 11, 13, 6 of the top 13.
That's unbelievable. And that's a team that already has 5 returning national champs, only one of whom will be a senior.
And those 6 guys being Teasdale, Michael Beard, Travis Whitlake, Roman Bravo Young, Seth Nevels, and Joe Lee. So,
I guess the big question to ask is, with all of that talent coming on board and the talent coming back, will that Penn State team be good enough to beat the Flow All-Star team?
Not a chance.
From Matt McCutcheon and Vincenzo Joseph's whiteboard war video against Flow Wrestling, where they fell a good effort, but lost 40-6 ultimately to the superior Flow Wrestling team. If you haven't got a chance to watch that viral YouTube video, an absolute must-watch. Credit to those guys for not only having incredibly good dry sense of humor, that's my kind of humor right there, but also being classy about it, giving Flow the nod at the end, thanking them for their efforts for the sport, but definitely a must-watch video.
Yeah, and dude, I love when guys do stuff like that. We get so used to, I mean, you and I, it's a little bit different because we went through it as athletes, but people get so caught up in these guys competing at such a high level, and it's almost like you only view them as athletes. You don't realize that we're all, at the time, we're all college kids. We're a lot of whom have great senses of humor. I mean, I know some of the laughs that we shared as a team in my time at Lehigh. We had a blast, and the personalities you encounter are a big part of what makes wrestling so much fun. So to see guys like that kind of humanize themselves, it makes it more enjoyable for everybody, for all the fans. So when those guys compete, you can look at it. It's not just a name. It's not just a guy that, oh man, he's tough. He's 30-something and 0 and won a national title and this, that, and the other thing. It gives you a small window into what they're like off the mat. So I think that stuff's awesome, and that it's good for the sport, and it's great marketing, not only for that program in and of itself, but just for NCAA wrestling.
Yeah, and that's why, episode 1, I think it was, we talked about guys who are the best guys to follow on Twitter. I'm all about the guys having the personality off the mat, giving the fans a glimpse of what they're really all about. I mean, if you just, you see guys being so serious sometimes, you get on the Twitter and stuff and everyone's tweeting the motivational advice and stuff, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but, some people, I don't know, they just kind of try to conform, I think, to what the sports world, almost like an MMA mentality where the guys are always kind of talking trash to each other. But it's funny to watch guys, some of those guys we've named, and videos like that where guys are just showing they have a good sense of humor and keeping it casual. So it's good to see.
Changing gears a little bit, just quick touch on this topic. UFC 214, full of former wrestlers, as UFC cards normally are. The 2 main fights, the second to last fight, I guess the first part of the main card. Tyrone Woodley, who was an All-American at Mizzou. He doesn't have any ties to Pennsylvania, but Tyrone Woodley defends his title. So he's still a UFC champ. It's always good to see a former wrestler. Then at the light heavyweight, a fight between probably the 2 best dudes to ever throw down at that division. John Jones knocked out Daniel Cormier. Cormier, of course, being an Olympian, national finalist at Oklahoma State. Bones was a JUCO guy. So both of them, college wrestlers. Cormier was a great champ, both in and out of the octagon with the way he conducted himself. Bones, probably the best ever at that division. But the moral of that story is awesome to see so many wrestlers doing so well, post-wrestling and MMA, and still giving love back to the sport. So, just congratulations to Bones and Woodley. Hopefully Cormier bounces back.
Now we're going to move on. We're going to, as always, head to our recruiting roundup. We've had 2 fairly substantial commitments here in the last week, and then we've got one other guy, a big PA stud, who has announced his final 4 schools. So starting off with, Mason, you take this one away. Actually, 2 AA guys, so you go ahead and start off with Joey Clock.
Yeah, so Joey Clock, Benton High School wrestler, a Russ Hughes product. Benton now coached by Brian Hart, but Russ Hughes, the longtime head coach there. Clock was a Cadet Greco All-American, I believe last summer, not this summer, and went 2-2 at AA States, lost in the blood round. He's headed to Bucknell, so just another guy in the Bison room, in the Bison class that they've kept home from, inside of Pennsylvania. So
is that the 3rd or 4th commitment we've seen for Bucknell just in the last few weeks?
At least 3.
Yep, we got Noah Levitt and Carnell Andrews.
Yeah, and then Clock. So Bucknell doing a good job, man.
Same size too, right? All pretty lightweights.
Yeah, light middleweights. So Bucknell doing a good job keeping guys home. Quietly putting together a pretty good class. And then the other guy that committed, Pennsylvania guy, Anthony Walters, formerly of Westmont Hilltop High School, now Bishop McCourt, has gone 8th, 2nd, AA States. The 2 guys he lost to in the state finals being Gavin Hoffman and Greg Bolsack. So not a whole lot of shame in his state final losses. A Flow Nationals runner-up, also to Gavin Hoffman. He's the number 6 guy in the country at 195. He's the number 47 overall recruit in the class of 2018 per Flow Wrestling. So he's headed to Drexel out Philly way. So
shout out to Jeff Upson from PA Power Wrestling for getting Anthony on the high school podcast edition to announce that decision live on the podcast. That was cool. I like how he set that up. I don't know about you, Mason. I was a little bit surprised. I mean, it's hard to get inside these high school guys' heads and try to determine where they're going to go, but it's fun to speculate and look at, where, I don't know, maybe where guys from their area or their school have gone before, or what college they're going, the colleges that they're narrowed down to, what needs they have. And I know I saw, or at least in the podcast, he talked about his final 4 schools, and I was pretty sure he was going to say he was going to UVA. That was just my speculation. They've picked up a lot of guys from the Pittsburgh area in the last probably 10 years or so. And I don't know. I could have seen that for sure, but he's going to Drexel, so that's a good pickup for the Dragons out there in Philly.
It's a huge pickup for Coach Azevedo and company out there. So, hopefully Anthony caps his career with that elusive state title, and obviously we wish him the best of luck out there in Philly.
Yeah, and then our last guy, as we talked about, last big-name guy, Josh Stillings from Penn Ridge. He was a state runner-up this year in AAA, I want to say 160, behind Trent Hidley, which Trent Hidley, just a Fargo runner-up a couple weeks ago. One of the top guys in the country, so no shame in that loss as well. I think he gave him a pretty good match, too. Stillings is a tough dude. I think he's All-American to NHSCAs a few times, so he's a guy on the national radar for sure, and he's narrowed it down to 4 schools. He's got Campbell, Old Dominion, the Monarchs down there in Northern Virginia, American, and Drexel as well. So Stillings, not sure when he's going to make his decision, and not sure if he will, in similar fashion to Walters, make it via PA Power podcast. That would be very cool if he does, but down to those 4 schools.
Yeah, and at least 3 of them have very direct Pennsylvania ties. Number 1, Drexel, obviously located in Pennsylvania. American, coached by Teague Moore, who's a Pennsylvania great, North Allegheny native. Campbell, coached by arguably the best high school wrestler ever, Kerry Kolat, not just Pennsylvania high school wrestler ever.
And assistant coach Mike Evans now.
Yes, so Pennsylvania ties all over the board. Old Dominion.
They got a Pennsylvania tie. They got a couple Cumberland Valley alum, Tristan Warner, Ryan Williams. The latter being a lot more successful, NCAA finalist. 2, the guy we just talked about, Jay Jagger. So funny how that came full circle. But yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting to see where Stillings ends up. I think he's gonna. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of those schools, really. If Stillings, if he goes to Drexel, I mean, there's a perfect workout partner for him in Walters. Yeah, like I said, if you go to Campbell, you got Mike Evans as your coach. I mean, doesn't get a whole lot better than that. A 3-time All-American. So
no, and one of the best guys to never win it. I'm not sure if we included him in that conversation we had a few episodes ago, but he was right up there.
Old Dominion. I know Jack Decco's sticking around for at least a little bit. He was an All-American for us, got 4th as a freshman, and then had probably the toughest draw I've ever seen in the history of college wrestling since I've been alive. Hitting Gabe Dean, taking him into Ultimate Rideout, or into the tiebreakers in the quarters, and then dropping down and wrestling Miles Martin the next match and losing to him in the tiebreakers. So should have been a 2-time All-American, but I mean that's another guy who's sticking around ODU. So there's another guy he'd have as a partner. So yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't go wrong with any of those. I'm excited to see where Stillings ends up.
And I'm sure any one of those decisions, he'll be in good hands. So, rolling on, we got Junior Worlds that just took place over in Finland. From a freestyle side of things and a Pennsylvania related, Mark Hall, Penn State wrestler, Minnesota native, well, I guess actually Michigan native, but Mark Hall wins himself another world title, along with Gable Stevenson and Dayton Fix. All in all, 7 medalists in junior men's freestyle for the United States, 6 guys in the finals for the first time since 1984, since the Reagan administration. That phenomenal ticket in 1984 with Bush and Reagan, by the way.
Reaganomics.
Dude, killing it. For the first time since Reagan, the United States junior men's freestyle team brings home a world title. So shout out to those guys. Congratulations. I mean, not much else to say other than absolutely outstanding. And for me personally, I'm thrilled about the future of USA Wrestling. And not just freestyle. If you roll over into women's and Greco, we had a world champ in all 3 styles for the first time ever at Junior Worlds. You know, with Kamal Bey winning Greco. Yes.
Maya.
So we had a world champ all 3 styles at Junior Worlds for the first time ever. So I don't know about you guys. I'm thrilled about the future of USA Wrestling. I think our developmental program is doing an absolutely outstanding job. Another thing I'm excited about, 141 next season. Give us the rundown, Tristan.
Yes, 141. As always, we preview a different weight class. We're all the way up to 141 now. This in episode 4. So there's actually a lot of guys in this weight class that are going to be tough returners, going to be, returning NCAA qualifiers. Got a couple new faces as well. But I would say pretty much every single guy on this list, we got 7 or 8 here, are definitely All-American contenders. And that's saying a lot, especially a couple of them are just real young guys, too. Starting off, I'm just going to run through a couple of these big names, and then Mason, you pick a few who you think stand out. And obviously, you're going to talk about Luke Karam. He's a Lehigh guy. We get it. But yeah, this guy's the real deal. He's a redshirt freshman. If you listen to our last podcast, you heard NCAA champ Darian Cruz, sing of his praises. He's a tough kid. 3-time state champ.
Yeah,
he was in the transition period where Bethlehem Catholic was like bouncing back and forth between AA and AAA. But either way, he came out with 3 titles. Looking like he's going to go up to 41 next season. Wrestled his redshirt year at 133 and did pretty well. Was around a 12er at Midlands and had some good open tournament wins. We got Jared Cortez's name here. We're not exactly sure what's going to go on with him. I know he suffered the injury late in the season last year, or maybe midway through the season. He's probably going to be up at 41 for Penn State, assuming he's healthy, and all those Penn State guys are good, especially Cortez came out with a ton of accolades out of high school, so we know he's talented. Brock Zacharel, one of my favorites on this list, went 1-2 at NCAAs last year, but this guy's a gamer. He's one of those guys that's been really good in the freestyle circuit. Got 30 universities this year with wins over Anthony Ashnault and Earl Hall, and lost his opening round match at NCAAs. This is something that people might not know or might have overlooked. To Dean Heil, now a 2-time NCAA champ, 6-5. And Mason, me and you were talking about this earlier in the week. That wasn't even a match where it was like Heil had a 6-1 lead and then got tired, and then Zacharel tacked on a few pity points at the end. He was battled into the wire the entire match. And the thing, I'm the big social media guy, big Twitter guy. The thing I liked the most about Brock Zacharel was right when the brackets came out, I saw a bunch of people tweeting stuff about how Zacharel drew Dean Heil in the first round. Obviously, nobody wants to get the number 1 seed in the first match, except Brock Zackerl. He tweeted something. He just changed the wording around and reversed it to say that Dean Heil got the worst draw in the bracket. He got Brock Zackerl, so I respected him for that.
Yeah, and that match, like you said, that wasn't a match where Heil kind of controlled it, gave up one silly takedown at the end, and that's what made it seem close. That was probably the most exciting match of the entire first round. Either that or Crutchmer and Rezzadori.
I want to say that was Heil's closest match of the tournament, too. Close ones, but I think he was closest to maybe getting picked off in that match.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That match there, I don't know what Heil's scores were throughout the tournament, but that match was very, very much in contention until the final whistle. So Zackerl's going to be a great guy to look out for. Other names on this list, I know you've already said some of these. Karam, Cortez, Zackerl, Nikki Zanetta, placer at Midlands, University Nationals placer. Tyler Smith, who was around a 12er out of Bucknell. Ronnie Perry, couple-time national qualifier out of Lock Haven. So pretty deep list of guys here as far as Pennsylvania ties go. The biggest wild card, though, in this whole conversation, without question, is Joey McKenna. Now, the reason Joey McKenna comes up, we all know, or at least we all should know, Joey McKenna, New Jersey native, Blair Academy product, realistically, inside and out a Jeff Buxton product. Out at Stanford, but it's been public knowledge that this summer he's been looking to transfer, has visited a number of programs. A couple of those programs that are high up on that list are Lehigh and Penn State. So, were McKenna to go to either one of those, obviously he jumps in, he kind of becomes fair game for us at PA Power to talk about him consistently with how he changes either one of the schools' lineups. Whether he would be 141 or 149 has yet to be seen. If he goes to Penn State, you got to think he's 41 because I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to wrestle Zane for a spot. So that, that's a given. He would make the cut back to 41. At Lehigh, I think he has more freedom to go up to 49. I know that he spent a lot of time in the Lehigh room with Buxton being the head coach of the Lehigh Valley Athletic Club, the regional training center that operates out of the Lehigh room. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The other big contender in there, at least one of the other big contenders, is Ohio State. But hopefully that doesn't come to be. Hopefully he comes to Pennsylvania, comes to the good side of the Pennsylvania-New Jersey line. Obviously me personally, I'd love to see him out at Lehigh. I know Joey, he spent some time in our club in high school. I've worked out with him a bunch. Great kid, incredibly talented. Obviously, that's been proven. He's been seeded, second twice at the national tournament?
Second or third this year. Can't remember which.
Yeah, but either way, a top 3 seed at worst both times. He was an All-American as a freshman. Last year, losing in the round of 12, lost a couple of barn burners. So McKenna could really shake things up if he transfers in. But moving past him, with this list of guys, you talked about Karen being around a 12er at Midlands. That kid he's just a flat-out gamer. He's very much in the mold of Randy Cruz. He's a little bit more active. Not a little bit. He's a good amount more active on his feet. Doesn't rely as much on scrambling as Randy did. But, really brutal on top. He's that long, lanky, clutchy, grabby guy on top. Great in boots. Got a lot of different and creative ways to turn you. So, Karam's a guy to look out for, and with as good as he is on top, and you know how this is, right? When you're that good on top, you put yourself in any match. You give yourself a chance. Because by default, when you're that good on top, especially now with a 4-point near fall, you can cause a lot of problems. If a guy like that locks his hands once and gets one turn, it completely changes the makeup of a match. So, Karam's going to be a guy that I think, and I obviously hope, as a Lehigh alum, that I hope Luke causes a lot of people a lot of problems next year. Cortez, we kind of know what he can do. He had some ups and downs at 33 last year. I think part of that was due to injury, part of that was due to weight cut. So if he does move up to 41 and, is in the Nittany Lions lineup, I'm sure he'll do good things. He's been a high-level guy since he was in high school out at Marmion Academy in Illinois. So Cortez is in the lineup. He'll do some good things. He'll do some very good things. Zach Earl, same thing. I actually wrestled him my senior year, his freshman year of high school. I think at the time it happened, I think I was actually Zach Earl's first high school loss. But he's a kid there that even as a freshman in high school, at the time that match took place, I had won close to 100 matches in a row, and you know how it gets to be in high school when a lot of kids will kind of go out to just survive against a top-tier guy, especially when they're young, as a freshman or sophomore. I gained the world of respect for Brock Zackrell that day when we went out and wrestled, him as a 14, 15-year-old kid, and we wrestled, and he really did. He threw the house. And it was a good match. I don't know what the score was. It was kind of a 5 or 6 point match, but that kid there, I remember walking off and looking at our coaching staff and telling them, that kid there is going to be really, really good before it's all said and done. So Clarion, quietly, as a program, is doing great things, which is awesome to see. Zackrell just keeps getting better and better. Took 30 universities. We talked about the Heil match, so he's a kid that's going to cause a lot of damage and could very, very well end up on the podium in March.
About Tyler Smith, you're talking about gamers on this list. That might be the biggest one of them all. Arguably, this guy, I remember the first time I think I watched him wrestle was when he was like I want to say, might have been his senior year in high school. Whenever he won a state title, he beat Pat Dugan, who's a Cumberland Valley guy, and he was losing that match pretty late and came back, rallied for the win. And that, little did I know at the time, but that is a Tyler Smith win. That's a Tyler Smith fashion win. Pretty much every match I've seen him win in college, he's been losing at some point in the match, and he just claws his way back and somehow guts out some 4-3 ultimate tiebreaker win or gets some reversal with 3 seconds left and wins. That kid just never quits. And he found himself in the blood round this year quietly. He's probably not a guy many people expected to see on Friday night out there, but yeah, that guy's a gamer for sure.
He's just scrappy, man, especially at the NCAA tournament. If you get a guy that's willing to fight and really make you hustle for every point the way Smith does, they're going to be – because it's such a long season, and the NCAA tournament, it's such a war of attrition, man. And if you get a guy like that that's just tough and is really going to force the issue in all three positions, those are the guys you see wrestling on Friday night and Saturday.
Those are the guys that surprise people, that sneak onto the podium, as they say, that you don't expect to see on there, but they're the guys who rise to the occasion when it matters. And like you said, some of those guys, day 2, day 3, I guess it would be day 2 if we're talking about not all-Americaning, but guys that you would expect to be on there, but, they're a little injured, they're banged up, it's a long season, and have a little bit of quit in them. And somebody like Tyler Smith doesn't. So he's a guy who, if you're going to beat him, it's going to be he threw the whole kitchen sink at you, and you just had more.
Yeah, and I think that, you mentioned having a little bit of quit in you. If you've never gone through the national tournament, people don't realize how, and especially you kind of feel it more when you're part of it and you're up in the tunnels, and you just kind of get a feeling for how, kind of the energy that different people have, right? And you can feel it as a match goes on, especially guys that are maybe a little beat up or guys that have been cutting a lot of weight all season, or maybe it's a guy's senior year, and maybe some people are just ready to be done. You know what I mean? And you hear it all the time when you're on, especially on the backside.
You don't believe it until you see it for yourself. That's the truest thing.
Oh yeah, and one of the things,
and the parents, it's hard for them to, and other kids who haven't wrestled there, it's maybe hard for them to fathom a statement like you just said. Come on, you're at the NCAA tournament. This is what you dreamed of. How could you have that quit in you?
You just go through so much.
And here's that. I was going to say that tournament itself is, more than any tournament you've ever wrestled in your life, is one of those ones where, people always say, coaches say, yeah, when you watch your teammate lose, or when you hear the crowd or anything like that, it's like wrestling a match in your head. It's like anytime you just walk through the hallway, you see the highest of highs emotions and the lowest of lows all around you for the entire. I mean, you're in the arena a good part of the day for 3 days straight, and you just see it all and you hear it all. So it's hard to.
And I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of that is in a 10-minute span. So in New York City, my senior year, I lost in the round of 12, 5-4 or 6-5. I don't know what the score was to Conaway, and that's a match I lost by a point. I had 59.5 seconds of riding time, so a half second more, and that match goes to overtime. And the match ends with me running backside and limp arming out to finish a single leg, right? So my career ends in as difficult a way as possible. As far as that specific match goes, I was really fortunate with the way my career played out, but in that moment, an incredibly hard way for it to end, right? I walk off the mat and I go back to, it's kind of hard to explain, but the theater up underneath the garden where we all kept our stuff, and they had screens set up that you could see the live feed of every match, these big projector screens.
You're going to say you saw Randy Cruz become an All-American.
Exactly. So in a span, about 10 minutes later, I walked down and I sat down in one of the seats in the theater, and I watched one of my best friends in life, one of my workout partners, everything, All-American. And like you just said, you go from the lowest of lows with my career ending, coming to terms with the fact that I'll never put on a singlet and really compete at a high level again, to sprinting up a couple flights of stairs. Actually, a couple flights of escalators, which almost ended really poorly. But, and about tackling Randy because I was so happy for him getting through. So, like you said, people don't realize the emotional highs and lows that you go through in that event are unlike any other. And that's why that kind of is what leads to these crazy upsets and all these other things. But to get back to the point about Tyler Smith, you hear all the time coaches say when guys are wrestling on the backside, give someone an excuse to quit. Guys will go away quietly if you give them an excuse to quit. And I know for me, as someone who, fun fact, I was 1-3 in the first round at NCAAs. I spent a ton of time wrestling in the consies. And that was John Hughes, our associate head coach. That was Hughes' thing. Go, hey, if you give people an excuse to quit on this backside, they'll go away quietly. And Smith's a guy that does that. He's just a pain, you know what I mean? He's a guy that maybe you beat by 5 or 6 during the year, and he just keeps digging and keeps digging. And maybe you're not as up and ready to go as you would be otherwise because you're on the backside, and Smith just kind of wrestles and makes life really difficult on people. And they get to a point in the match where they go, screw this. You know what I mean? You just get so frustrated, and it's not the side of the bracket you want to be wrestling in. And a guy like Tyler Smith, those guys, more often than not, will end up wrestling Friday night and Saturday, just obviously because they're great wrestlers, but out of such mental toughness and just being grinders. That's why you see all the time the guys wrestling in the All-American rounds and in the national finals. Not only are they outstanding wrestlers, but they're guys that are just so tough.
Yep, that's what you got to love about wrestling. Some people who aren't as familiar with wrestling or aren't as on top of the game when it comes to what it means to be an All-American, I guess is what I'm trying to describe. How they ask about, what does it mean to be an All-American? Like in a sport like football, it's just measured over your entire season or whatever, and they just pick, well, overall this guy did pretty well throughout the season. But in a sport like ours, which there are a few other sports like it, it's really just who shows up on those 3 days. And even for someone like myself who made it to the tournament 3 times but never placed, I wouldn't change that in a heartbeat. If I don't show up on those 3 days, then I don't deserve to be an All-American. That's how it should be. I like that. That's probably one of the best things about our sport is that it's not a collective, this guy was ranked top 8 all year, so he's going to be an All-American. No, it's who shows up on those 3 days, and if you deserve it and if you show up when it matters, that's what life's about. So I think that's how the sport should be too. So, I like it. And I think Tyler Smith will be on the podium this year. So,
agreed. And one of the best ways you could ever put it is, I was fortunate enough to go through it and, feel that feeling of getting through in the round of 12 twice. And I was watching a documentary on the Stanley Cup playoffs, and one of the guys, I forget who it was, but somebody at one point mentions, the quote was, I wish everybody could feel this at least once in their careers. And then he stops for a second and goes, but that's what makes it so special is that not everybody gets to do it. What makes it special is how hard it is. It's the same way with standing on that podium on Saturday. you have to show up. Like you said, you got to be there ready to wrestle for those 3 days in March. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
That's exactly right. And, that was a pretty long-winded discussion there for Tyler Smith. We're going to have to tag him in this one because he pretty much just dedicated about half the podcast to him. But that's how much he's impressed us. So good luck to him and good luck to the rest of all of our PA 141 contenders next year. I mean, I would not be at all surprised if we saw 3, 4, 5 of those guys on the podium, if not next year, the next year. Those guys are all talented and should be All-Americans here by the time their career's over. But, Mason, we've got another cool topic to discuss here. Each one of our podcasts, we have a similar setup for each one, and each one we like to have somewhat of a historical discussion. We like to bring in, as we were talking about, we're both big nerds of the sport. We like to bring in some element of history to talk about. What else do we have to do, So, Mason, you came up with this topic. It's a good one. We both took a little bit different approaches to our research for this, but shouldn't even really say research. We kind of just, off the top of our heads, thought of these. So, preface it by saying that I'm sure, just like we did with the Joneses and the Kings, and we probably forgot some people, so feel free to tweet at us or go ahead and send us your feedback if we missed any big names. But we wanted to take a look back over just the last maybe 10 years or so. Some of these are a little older, but we just tried to think of off the top of our head some of the best guys who've come out of Pennsylvania natives, that never All-American in college. And like I said, we took slightly different approaches to this one. Mason, a lot of your guys on this list you have are guys that came out of high school that were absolute studs, some of whom never really quite panned out in college to their full potential, or some of them, even a couple on your list, maybe got hurt, didn't even finish their careers. Some of the ones I listed were just more guys that were around my age that I thought of, who were guys that were consistently in the top 20, in the top, seeded at NCAAs, that would get there 3-4 times and just would always get somewhat close, but just always fall short. So why don't you, Mason, run through a couple of these guys that you thought of off the top of your head and just briefly go through them, and then I'll throw out a couple of mine.
So when I think about this topic as far as best guys to never get on the podium, names that come right to the top of my head, Anthony Zanetta is the first one. Won a couple state titles at Keystone Oaks High School. He's a longtime friend of mine, which is part of why he comes to mind right away. But Anthony made the round of 12 twice. Both of those matches, I think, were 1-point losses. So
I remember him losing to Bonanno from Hofstra one year. Is that right?
Yeah, he lost to Bonanno and then to Earl Hall.
I think he was winning that Earl Hall match, too, at one point. I remember him.
They were both back and forth matches. I've never seen the Hall match, and to be honest, I don't think I could ever bring myself to watch it with as good of friends as Anthony and I are. But I got Hall back for him the next year. I beat Hall in a round of 12 the following year.
And Darian beat Earl Hall for 7th.
That's true. So we at least got a little bit back for him.
Is that the same bracket?
Yeah. Darian won in the round of 12 on the other side. So other names, Andrew Alton, who in high school seemed like as much of a lock as anyone to immediately translate to high-level Division I success, which he did. Mm-hmm. Started as a true freshman for the Nittany Lions out there at Penn State, made the round of 12 as a true freshman, and little by little, I think weight cut, I think injuries.
Definitely some injuries from what I heard. I think both his shoulders, maybe even a knee. I think both the Altons. I think Penn State coaching staff and the Altons themselves did a good, I don't know if it's a good job, but kept a lot of their injuries under the rug. But from what I've been told, I think the Altons had some pretty significant injuries. So
yeah,
I'm quick to defend those guys whenever I hear people talk about how they didn't, they only got third once, but when you talk about the Altons in Pennsylvania wrestling, like, they're synonymous for me with some of the best ever. They're right up there with Chance Marsteller, who we're going to have on the show later here, and the Colats and Marshall Peppelman. The Altons are some of the best I've ever seen. Jordan Oliver, they're right up there.
I'll tell you what, the Altons, the one match that, completely sums up how good the Alton twins, both of them were, because they were about dead even. They wrestled over at Ironman their senior year. Andrew's wrestling in the semis against a kid from Matt Stevens from St. Paris Graham. And Stevens is like the number 4 or 5 dude in the country, right? And a guy that won 2 or 3 Ohio State titles, wrestled at Virginia Tech. So he goes out, and if anybody remembers watching Andrew wrestle, he was great with that. He'd go pancake, and if you fought back, he'd chin whip you. So right away, first 10 seconds of the match, he snaps, gets into that cement, and goes to chin whip backtrip Stevens, and they blow it dead for some reason. They called it potentially dangerous. No idea why. But, as Stevens is going to his back, they blow it dead, right? So they reset. They come back to the middle, snaps him down, and does the exact same thing again. They don't blow it dead this time, and pins him. So in the span of about 20 to 25 seconds, if that, Andrew essentially pinned a top 5 dude in the country twice.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that too. Because
It was just ridiculous.
I always try to describe that move to people when they whenever I try to describe. I just call it the Andrew Alton or the Dylan Alton, whichever Alton. They both did it, I think. And I try to describe the move. It's like a chin whip, back trip. But like you said, they set it up with the cement job. And I one day just YouTubed Andrew Alton wrestling, and it was literally the first or second YouTube video that popped up. It's actually on there right now if you want to check it out. It's him in the first round of states against Eddie Stevenson from Northern New York High School, which is right down the road from me. Wrestled in the first round. I think Andrew got the pin in 14 seconds, maybe. No shame to Eddie, because Andrew Alton would have pinned me in 14 seconds probably too, especially in that move. But if you want to see the move we're talking about, it's even got some good hard rock music soundtrack in there, so check it out. But yeah, that's the move. That's the move to you want to get a 14-second pin in the first round of the state tournament. That's the move to go to.
So Alton, Joey Napoli was another guy, high school teammate of yours at Cumberland Valley, won a state title. Yep. One of the best dudes in the country coming out of high school. He was a teammate of mine at Lehigh. Joey was a 3 seed at NCAA's his junior year. I mean, had a great year. His only losses were to Jason Welch and Derek St. John
and Welch.
Yeah, and he was a Midlands runner-up to Welch and everything, and just had a bad national tournament. Had a less than favorable draw with Taylor Walsh out of the gate, and just, so he doesn't end up All-Americaning that year, and the next year he just couldn't get himself. Never got himself completely healthy, had a couple injuries over the summer, and never allowed himself to heal the right way. And so Napoli's a guy. But honestly, if I'm looking at this list, the name that stands out to me the most is Garrett Scott. And for those of you who don't remember, maybe some high school kids listening to this now, Garrett Scott was, and this is no disrespect to Chance or any other high school kid I've ever seen, Garrett Scott was the best high school wrestler I have ever seen, and it's not close. This was a kid that won 3 state titles, and the only reason he didn't win 4...
Bold statement, folks. Bold statement coming from Mason Beckman, who knows everybody.
And I mean, it could be because at the age that I was at when Garrett was coming through high school, you know what I mean? You view things differently. Garrett was kind of, when I was in late elementary school, junior high, that was like the guy.
So many other things that made Garrett Scott so interesting. He didn't really look like a wrestler. He wasn't really a big, like you picture the best wrestler you've ever seen. You picture someone who's built more like Dalton's. Garrett Scott was like a tall, gangly, like shaggy blonde hair. Like he looked like he could have been in like a pop music group. And he wrestled for Juniata Valley. Not even Juniata, which is a bit more of a respectable AA team, but Juniata Valley. He might be their only ever state champ, state qualifier.
They don't even have a program anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Brock Scott, his cousin, I think it was, may have been a state finalist or state placer too. But besides those two, I've never heard of anything else from Juniata Valley. So he was just a complete anomaly.
They don't even have a program anymore. But so he won 3 state titles. He would have won 4 if not for reasons we won't get into. Wasn't allowed to wrestle the state tournament his senior year. I mean, just a freak. I can't even. There's so many examples. He goes to the so after not being able to wrestle the state tournament his senior year, he's in the Dapper Dan. He's wrestling a kid from, I think, Oklahoma, probably the number 2 or 3 ranked kid in the country, right? Garrett, after not having competed, say 3 or 4 weeks at this point, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, he goes out and he's winning this match like 7 or 8-2. It's on YouTube if you want to give it a look. But in the third period, he takes top, which in and of itself is ballsy enough to take top on one of the best kids in America. He takes top, and within 10 seconds of the whistle blowing, that kid's decked. He just went. He went. It was one of the most incredible. I'll never forget. I was sitting there front row for it. He goes spiral half and literally ran this kid. I think Salazar was the kid's last name. He just ran that kid straight over the top, made him do a headstand across his, not a headstand, but right across his shoulder blades. he like didn't wrestle at all for a couple of months, and he was going to Penn State originally. So Coach Sunderland tells him, that they want him to compete, at least get something in before he shows up on campus. So they sent him to Fargo without any training. He shows, or maybe with a week of training, right? He goes out and wins, I know he won junior freestyle, and I think he got OW. The dude was incredible, but he unfortunately struggled with some personal things off the mat. I don't think he had the best environment outside of wrestling, and it's a really
for Penn State for at least a year or two. I want to say 12.
Anytime he was on the mat to compete, he was amazing. It was never a question of wrestling ability, and it's a tragic story now. He's since passed away, and but from a pure talent standpoint, Garrett Scott was just amazing. And then other guys worth mentioning, just real quickly, the Sasuli brothers, Seth and Matt, both Easton guys. Matt won 3 state titles. Seth was a state finalist. Both of them wrestled at Lehigh, were multiple-time national qualifiers. Zach Horan, 4-time state finalist for Nazareth, true freshman round of 12er at Central Michigan. Joey Ekloff won 3 state titles. Donnie Jones, who we mentioned earlier. Timmy Darling, another dude that won everything under the sun in high school. Went to Penn State. Unfortunately, never panned out. So, this list could go on. But who all do you have?
Yeah, so like I said, you had a lot more guys that were some of your guys were similar to mine, but a lot of your guys were hammers in high school that maybe didn't have quite the college career that people expected. But some of the guys I listed here, just literally off the top of my head, driving in my car, guys that were solid throughout their whole college career. Most of these guys, I think, were 3 or 4-time NCAA qualifiers. So I know a few of them off the top of my head made the round of 12 at least once. Some of them were seeded multiple times, but just never quite cracked their way onto the podium. Just off the top of my head, I had Mike Ottinger, Parkland guy, went to Central Michigan, was always good at 174, but never quite made it. My boy here, shout out Joe Spizak, Boiling Springs product, District 3 legend, and another AA guy there for you, Mason. You guys were right around the same age and weight. I don't think you ever wrestled, but yeah, Spizak, that lean muscle weight. Went to UVA, was really good, qualified all 4 years, even as a true freshman at 33 and 41, but I know he had, that's not probably public knowledge either, but just from talking to him, he had some injuries in the postseason that probably kept him from getting on the podium. But his 1 year, I think it was, let's say it was his redshirt junior year maybe. It might even be his senior year. He was in the Southern Scuffle finals against Zane and had a really close match with Zane when he was a true freshman.
Yep.
And he beat Dardanes earlier in the day, who was might have been number 1 in the country that year. He might have been the 1 seed. I forget. But 1 or 2. So that was huge for Spizak. Mac McGuire, a Whitfield guy there, wrestled 133 for Kent State and was always good, always ranked top 15. I think he was a 9 or 10 seed 1 year.
Yep.
Had Nick Bonacorsi, 197-pounder for Pitt. He got big in college, by the way. Me and him used to wrestle every once in a while in high school at 152, and then he got huge.
You know what Nick was? He's beefy. He's a thick human being.
He was good, too. Good wrestler.
Oh, he was really good. I'm just saying.
And his younger brother,
physical.
Nino, is going to be pretty tough next year coming in for Pitt, too.
Yeah, Nino, you talk about one of the best dudes to never win a state title, Nino Bonacorsi.
Yeah, and we talked about him in, I think, episode 1. We were talking about previewing Pitt. Yeah. And then the last 2 guys I had on here, Josh Jeva, Pennsbury, and then ended up transferring to Council Rock South for his senior year. He was, like you were talking about, Mason, an absolute stud in high school. Even beat my high school teammate Sean Greavy in the state finals 1 year, who was a 3rd and a 2nd in PA States, who went on to wrestle at Chattanooga. Not to salt the wound, but the roll through half he hit to pin him was awesome. But wish he could have hit it on somebody else, but it was a nice move. It's all right. Just moments later, I went out and got dumped to my back in the first 20 seconds of that same state final. So Coach Dave Heckard had a lot to smile about that night. Psych. Yeah, so Josh Jeva, he was always ranked pretty high. Once he cracked Iowa's lineup their final 2 years or so at 41. And I know he had quite a few wins over guys who eventually did All-American, just never got on there himself. And the last one I had was Tony Delago, another Central Dolphin product. Went out to Illinois, wrestled 184. I know he made the round of 12 his senior year, I'm pretty sure. And I think he was always a couple-time national qualifier, was always in there in contention, but just never quite made it. So that's the list I came up with just off the top.
Yeah, and I think we could go on and on. I mean, Pennsylvania has produced so many guys that for one reason or another, there's so much that goes into college wrestling. There's so many potential roadblocks that, it's not a knock on these guys. I think more than anything, it's a statement about how hard it is to get yourself on the podium, All right, and welcoming in now, 4-time undefeated high school state champion out of Kennerdale High School. Originally went to Oklahoma State, now at Lock Haven University. University Nationals champion this past summer, this spring. World Team Trials placer at the senior level, Chance Marsteller. Chance, thanks for coming on, bud.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you, man?
Real good, man. Real good.
So, like I said, with universities and the senior World Team Trials and everything, just kind of take us through what you've been up to and, with taking a year away from college wrestling and competing like crazy this spring and summer, just, kind of catch us up with what you've been up to.
It's been a long and busy year since August. I've gone through a lot of learning experiences, and I a good spring of competing, I feel. I wrestled the U.S. Open, and I had university duels and university nationals, and then World Team Trials, all in a matter of like 5 or 6 weeks, all 4 of those tournaments. So, leading up to all those, I knew I would hit all of them and compete as much as I could. I had a good, long, hard training cycle leading up to them. And I'd been working with Dave Murray on his program called Clarity Prep. It's a real excellent program about the mental side of things with athletes and stress and anxiety. So, leading up to all these things, we talked earlier about assessing, the way I've wrestled and whatnot. So from that clarity prep, I learned a lot about, trying to learn as much as I can. And so, I won University Nationals and won undefeated the duels, and I took 2 losses at the Open, I took 2 losses at the Trials, and more than anything now, I just try to win or I try to learn. So if I'm going to lose, I don't really see it as losing anymore. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And just soak everything in. So, I feel like I also pretty well at the University Nationals. I really felt like my footwork and my timing and my conditioning and everything was really starting to come back. And we're at the Trials the next week, and I thought I had a pretty good tournament. And instead of being picked off, I lost a couple matches. I came home with a learning experience. Mostly from the Trials, I took from it that I have to physically get stronger to compete with guys like Alex Danger, Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Dake. As well as physicality, I felt like I needed to gain. So all summer long here, I live in Lock Haven now all the time, and I barely ever leave unless it's to go like the Junior Olympics where I was at last week coaching with Team PA out in Michigan. But whether I'm coaching or helping out, I really don't ever leave the Haven. I constantly am in the room. But more than anything this summer, I've tried to take my lifting and my strength training to another level. Because I mentally, I know I need to physically be stronger to compete with some of the best. Because I feel like the wrestling is really, really there. And then also this summer, a good bit lately, I've been training up at the Mini Lion. I've been lucky enough to go in there and train with some of the best in the world, Penn State's best. So, that was a good learning experience lately, and as well as it's pretty humbling. Something about the Penn State room here and there. I feel once again like I'm just trying to learn as much as I can, and be as humble as possible. So stepping back in that room is just pretty humbling, and just it opened my eyes to, when you do the right things, how many good things can come. So over the past year, I've just been trying to do as many little things right as I can. That's what's really making the biggest difference in my life over the past year. So,
Chance, after taking this last year off, and now you're probably getting ready to switch gears back to folk style, what are you looking forward to most about getting back on the mat and getting back into wrestling season?
I forgot for a while how much I just love the grind, how much I just love this sport. And more than anything, I'm just looking forward to just constantly being in the middle of things. And just to continue to compete. I just remember growing up how much I loved competing every weekend. My parents, they would drive them crazy, they'd say, because, they'd want a break, and I'm the one asking her for another tournament. And it hasn't really been that way for the past probably 2.5 years, and now, I just want to, wrestle as much as I can. So I'm just really excited to compete. And again, to learn as much as I can throughout this upcoming season. And there's nothing more fun than competing. So I'm just looking forward to that.
You talked about how you're kind of learning all over again, how much you love the grind and all these different things. With all that time away from competing, this past year up until the spring when freestyle really kicked in, did that change kind of how you view wrestling? And, do you think that's helped you kind of fall in love with the sport again? Or, what kind of impact has that had?
When I first changed to the basketball Penn State, I really thought I had found the passion again. But, I feel like I was still wrestling for the wrong reasons. I still wanted to prove people wrong instead of doing everything from the inside, inside of the home. And so over this past year, just not really be able to compete, I had to actually learn how to live outside of wrestling. I had to learn how to be a person that didn't have wrestling 24/7. I just learned not to take anything for granted. Just the little things. Last August, those couple of days, I was locked up, and just getting out. I was like, wow, just looking at the green grass is just. You take that stuff for granted, just a breath of fresh air, you take it for granted. So I didn't even realize, just a college wrestling room, college partners, coaches, just being able to do a tournament, I took all of it for granted. And a scholarship, took it for granted. School, took it for granted. And, so I think that's what changed the most, is just that, I'm grateful for everything I have now, and I'm grateful for every opportunity I get to do anything. And I relearned how to live again. Probably for a couple of years there, I don't think I ever had one genuine smile. And, after everything happened, learning how to live again, I smile all the time now. Watching the Penn State guys, these are just smiling when they compete, and it's because they truly love the sport. And I used to be way too prideful to learn from other schools, other people. And now I try to take my pride out of everything, and like I said, learn as much as I can. And when I was doing that, one of the biggest things I saw, I think was the biggest change in me, was watching those dudes smile. And I said to myself, I never smiled growing up. I want to try to smile as much as they do, and I want it to be real. And when it becomes real, and I'm just enjoying all these things, like seeing my family, going to practice, just being allowed to wake up and go lift in a school weight room, that's when things started to click and change. And I really think just being grateful is and having the attitude of gratitude is what changed, and that's key.
You've talked a lot about learning since the last few years. On the flip side of that coin, you're probably one of the best person that youth wrestlers and kids can learn from on the mat. And I know from the time you were on me and Mason's Wayne Danger team from the time you were in 7th grade, and still to this day, I just read that Flow article a couple weeks ago. You still are one of the best kids I've seen in terms of being a mentor for younger kids. You're always out there coaching kids, and any chance you get, you're, I saw an article, you and I think Sasso were over at Dark Knights, maybe coaching a clinic. Talk a little bit about just, this last year and this off season. Have you gotten to be able to do stuff like that? And I know you love giving back to the sport, so just helping out kids and coaching in the off season, stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, I've again been grateful for a lot of opportunities in that area too. While I was home and not in school during the fall session, I was lucky enough to have my athletic director from high school reach out and ask me to coach the junior high team. And I took that role, and while I was a learning experience, we didn't have many numbers, and it was different than what I was used to. And that in itself was humbling. And I learned, like I said, I learned more from those kids this year than anything. And then just, for a while, like being asked to train young kids at different places, and I really wasn't being asked too much anymore. And I was this summer it started to pick up again, and all during the fall I was helping out with a couple Central Mountain wrestlers and this club called Ride Out. They reached out to me, and I've been able to help them out since the spring. They're an up and coming club, and I've been all over the place this summer helping out with different people. And I mean, it's a blast. Like like I said to people before, I just want to see people be the best them they can be. And so I know when I go in a wrestling room and I try to help these kids, do a move to perfection, even though something's not going to be perfect. Like that's my thing. I just want to make every wrestling room I step into the best room it can be, and bring something out of everybody. I just got the chance to go coach the junior Olympic team with Penn State in my house for a week in Michigan. I just got home 2 days ago. And wow, was that a trip? Just growing up, learning different things, trying to bring the best out of each one of those wrestlers as I could, to being trusted to do room checks at night. I think I learn more from these kids than they do from me sometimes. And I mean, it's what I love to do. Like I think I love coaching almost as much as I love competing. I want to coach one day in college, and I try to learn as I coach, and I try to take as much as I can from other coaches and see how they treat kids.
So you mentioned future plans and everything. Moving forward right now, as school kicks up again, what's kind of on the docket for you? What do the next few months hold for Chance Marsteller?
Not 100% sure about, everything. I plan on doing that. There's an under-23 World Team Trials. I would like to compete in that, see where that takes me. And hopefully, I hope to be competing in Cleveland in March. So, I'm just going to work up to that point, live quietly, and see where things go. And hopefully I'm on top of the podium come March, and then, freestyle comes rolling right around again. That's my true passion. So, nothing really changes from now till then. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, focus on being the best me I can be every day, doing the best I can do in school, and getting on the mat as much as possible. That's not, nothing's going to change from now till next year, and the year after that, I'm just going to do what I've been doing every day now for about the past year. So,
Chance, we don't want to hold you too long, but just going to give you a little opportunity here if you want to say anything else to, despite whatever, road bumps have been in the past, I want you to know you have a ton of fans out there behind you. You have a ton of little kids and even older kids now who look up to you and really want to see you do great things. So if there's anything else you want to say or anybody else you want to thank, there's a lot of PA Power fans out there supporting you. So we're all hoping you get back on that podium, do great things.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for bringing me on the talk. I had a blast, and more than anything, I gotta thank the whole state of PA. I gotta thank the wrestling world's a family, and I'm thankful for how many people did help me through this, and more than anything, I'm thankful for my family. And the family of me here at Lockheed as well. I'm truly lucky and blessed to come through what I've come through in the past year, and hopefully, and continue to rise and bring everybody up with me as I go along. So, again, thanks for having me on the show, and thank you to everybody out there that's been behind me this whole way.
Keep doing good things, man. We're rooting for you.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you're doing well, Chance. So thanks for coming on, and obviously, good luck. Rooting for you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, take it easy, bud. All right, so once again, thank you to Chance Marsteller for coming on. And that kind of leads us into our Lock Haven 2017 preview. Chance, like he said, his status is still uncertain, but guys whose statuses are certain. For the Bald Eagles out there, for Coach Scott Moore, Ronnie Perry and Thomas Haynes, both Pennsylvania natives, returning NCAA point scorers. So those are both guys that, I think that you can expect big things out of next year. Both have just been consistently solid guys. You know what you're getting, and hey, if you're scoring points at the national tournament, you're doing some pretty good things. So both of those, I'm sure that Coach Scott Moore is looking for big things out of them. To follow those guys up, DJ Failman was a national qualifier at 133 as a true freshman, I believe. Kyle Shoup was an NCAA qualifier at 149. So those are, four returning guys that were national qualifiers, for a program that just continues to build. To continue with that building theme, their incoming recruits, you got 6 Pennsylvania medalists here. Luke Werner, Todd Lane, Larry Brown, Brock Port, Sammy Hepler, and Blake Reynolds. 5 of those 6 multiple-time Pennsylvania high school state medalists. Werner, Lane, and Port, all of whom are state finalists. And these guys project all over the board weight-wise, from Luke Werner down at 125, Blake Reynolds all the way up at 197, and all sorts of guys through the middleweight. So, I personally think the Lock Haven program is in a good place. Kind of the same as I mentioned with Clarion earlier. I think they're quietly building, and come whatever may with Chance's situation, with 4 returning national qualifiers, 2 returning NCAA point scorers, as well as this incoming class, I think the Bald Eagles are sitting in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and just looking through that list of incoming recruits you just named, I swear there must be some kind of curse if not one of those guys won a state title, because all 6 of those are household names. Those are guys I've seen in the national rankings and guys I've seen in the state brackets for years, placing at state. So I'm kind of dumbfounded that not one of those guys has a state title to their name. But either way, those are 6 solid pickups for Lock Haven, literally all 6 of them. And a lot of them fill weight needs that they're probably going to need. I mean, that's from top to bottom. You got lightweights all the way up to 197-pounder and Blake Reynolds. And just real quick, yeah, like you said, Ronnie Perry, we talked about him in the 141 preview. Maybe didn't go in as depth as we could have just because there's so many guys at that weight. But Perry was a guy, Mason, me and you talked about this previously, that beat A.J. Schopp a couple years ago in the EWL finals as a freshman. I mean, that guy has showed – he beat Chris McCarty, my teammate from ODU, who's a 2-time All-American. So he's shown flashes of brilliance. He's a good kid, and he just keeps getting better every year. And he keeps getting bigger. Remember him being like a 106-pounder in high school, I think, if I'm remembering the right guy. Or 113, something like that, from Solanco. Haynes could easily be an All-American this year. He's, some people may – because he's a heavyweight, some people may not even realize this, but – Chance Marsteller, when he won his 4th state title, I believe that was the first time in Pennsylvania history that someone had become a 4-time Pennsylvania AAA state champion who wasn't ever a 103-pounder. So Chance was the first person to ever do that, I believe. And then literally 3 weight classes later, Thomas Haynes did the exact same thing. So Thomas Haynes, a 4-time state champion, in Pennsylvania AAA, which at non a 103-pounder, I mean, even with, that's very rare. But so he was an incredible talent coming out of high school. Yeah, exactly, and they got both those guys. I mean, assuming Chance is on the squad next year. So, would not at all be surprised to see Haynes on the podium. And then the last 2 guys I wanted to mention real quick, 2 District 3 products, local guys here. John Ross at 157 from Northern High School. He was 2-time state 5th placer, I think. I think he ended up starting some matches this year. Came out of red shirt and wrestled some matches and did pretty well, actually. And then Jared Segrist from Mannheim Central, think he wrestled at 165, maybe even bounced up to 174 a little bit. Had a pretty decent year for either a true freshman or a redshirt freshman. I think he had a winning record, had some decent wins. Probably one of those guys that was like right on the bubble of like being in the top 32, 33 of the rankings as a true freshman. Pretty solid. So, I mean, obviously that lineup could be shifted a little bit depending on what happens with Chance. But either way, Lock Haven has a lot of talent coming back, and they're still pretty young. Most of the guys we just named, I don't know if any of those guys are seniors. So still a young team for Scott Moore to work with.
And it's good to see the smaller state schools kind of on the rise again, with Edinburgh's always Edinburgh, and Clarion and Lock Haven really starting to put things together and build up. So it's an exciting time.
That's going to wrap it up for us at the PA Power College Podcast. As always, thank you for joining in, and guys, feel free to hit us with your feedback on Twitter and on Facebook. I'm Tristan Warner. Find me on Twitter at WarnTriz, and my partner, as always, is Mason Beckman. Find him at Beck_Diggity. Visit PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at PAPowerWrestle, and go ahead and give us a friend on Facebook. Until next time, stay classy, wrestling fans.